All right. Stephen, I'm just going to have to say thank you. It's going to be a hard talk to follow, but hopefully I can follow on from where he left off. Like Stephen, I'm the same. My job is at the actual end, the pinnacle. I'm here to find those next Joseph schoolings. So, but again, the message is the same thing. It's what's happening from the bottom all the way through that allows me to do my job at the top and to help the coaches that are at that end to reap the rewards from how we're supported and everything from the government. This is not my favorite environment to speak in. I much prefer to be in environments where it has more tangibility to it, where I can get into conversation with people and we can ask each other questions and go back and forth and kind of get to a point of finding a direction forward from where we start. I believe that as coaches we need to make sure that we're continually finding a way to educate ourselves and understand processes in order for us to implement it in the situation that we're in. And that doesn't matter, there's no difference if you're coaching a young or instructing a young child that's learning how to swim, or if you're at the top end working with the highest level of athletes at an Olympic Games. The importance all the way through, everyone, it's like a pyramid that leads to the top, and what happens at the bottom and it happens at the next level, to the next level, to the next level, is what allows everything to keep filtering through. One of the things I really thank you for talking about, and it's one of the biggest things we have difficulties here in Singapore, is everyone coming together and working as one. We have a lot of independent agencies that, ministries in different levels, that everyone wants to get to the same point, but we don't necessarily work on each other's strength to move forward in those directions. And I'm hoping that there's more people that can come along and help that pathway forward, okay? So I'm not going to talk about any statistics or anything like that today. I'm going to keep this quite short and try and get to the point, but hopefully make it a little bit more relevant, especially for the Singaporeans that are in here, to kind of piece everything together. Obviously, 2016 was a great year for Singapore, and yesterday was a huge message that came through on where the country wants to move forward from the government level in order to provide more funding in order for us to find more Joseph schoolings. Okay, so here in this diagram you see, this picture's been thrown around a lot, where you see Joseph with Michael Phelps as a young boy, and then you see the two of them together last year in 2016 at the Olympic Games. And so for me, it's like a full circle of development. Both of these boys, there's a very close similarity on where they started from and where they got to where I would call their peak, where they were at their peak. Okay, so Michael Phelps, I wouldn't consider this last year to be his peak. He was kind of at the end of his career. His peak would have been what I consider as 2008 in Beijing. So if we look at where he started as a young boy learning how to swim, it was about a 7-year-old boy that was still afraid to put his face in the water. And it took individuals that helped encourage him along the way. But one of the biggest influences were the people that were immediately around him, and that was his siblings. He had siblings that were participating in swim teams, and he enjoyed going and watching them and wanted to be part of it with them. He had parents that were both physically active, particularly his father. His father didn't have a lot of influence in his life, but he did from a very young age. His father was a state trooper, and then he was a football player who even got to a level out of college trying to play for the Washington Redskins. I don't think they were the Washington Redskins at that time, were they? Yeah. So there was examples that were shown for this child. So the very first mentors in his life were his siblings and his parents, and it gave a strong indication of the importance of being physically active for life. It wasn't something that, for him at that young age, life was where his parents were. And the engagement of doing a lot of things from a very young age allowed him to develop skills that got him to where he was as an elite athlete. We fast forward to 2008, the US team was training here in Singapore at the Country Island Country Island Country Club. And Joseph's father was very integral in the program, and Joseph got to meet Michael Phelps. At this point in time, Joseph is 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, a very influencing part of his career, as far as he had this development, a multi-sport development from the youngest age, again with parents who were very active, physically active, and exposed him to multiple sports. He played everything. The only thing he didn't play were contact sports. He had some physical issues with scoliosis, and his parents were just a little worried if he got into more contact sports that would be damaging to his spine. But it didn't take away from the types of sports that they engaged him in, and they allowed him to play. And I think this was at a time, too, in Singapore where kids played on the streets as well. Now we don't really see the kids playing too much on the streets anymore in Singapore. That opportunity just to run and play haphazard with no structure to it. To me, that's play. That's where they learn the majority of their skills in life. Okay, so we have to take it upon ourselves to provide opportunities for them to learn. Okay, so 2008, Joseph meets Michael Phelps prior to Michael Phelps going to Beijing in his illustrious 8 gold medal performance. And Joseph was able to be there to watch that. If we rewind back, when Michael Phelps was, in 1996, when Michael Phelps was 11 years of age, he was able to meet Tom Malchow, who was a United States 200 butterflyer and who went to the 96 Olympics and won a gold medal in the 200 butterfly. So both boys inadvertently had some contact with mentors where it wasn't in a position where it was, how can I say, it was inadvertent. Okay, they were inadvertent mentors. So they were people that they had a dream, and then they saw and they had some contact with this individual, and then they watched what happened with progress, and it allowed them to envision themselves following through on that dream. Okay, so it all started. It started with a young child, and it started with a dream. And then they were giving and they were exposed to the right environments and the right atmospheres, and they were both exposed to a high level of instruction at the right points in time. And it allowed them to develop. Both boys reached their peaks at the age of 21 years of age. Both boys started, Joseph at the age of 5, we're learning how to swim, Michael Phelps at the age of 7. So there's a long journey and there's a long process that got them to where they were. They didn't get there because they just had a separate set of skills and it sets them aside from everybody else. But there was something about them that allowed them to keep making those progressions forward. They had the desire, they had the determination, and these things were inherent by the environments that were provided around them. It nurtured it. And they're the things that we have to always remember. If we want to get the athletes to the top, we need to have a pathway that goes through. Okay? We'll go to here. All right, so for me, one of the things that, from the NSA, I do have responsibilities in looking back to see how we can progress forward. If my job is to create that next Olympic champion or that next gold medal, I need to know where the athletes are coming from. And the first thing is having maximum participation, higher achievement through the development with better health and life balance. Okay, in sport, there are no guarantees. We never know what's going to happen. We can put things in place. We can provide opportunities. We can spend the money. We can build the facilities. But there is no guarantee that any individual is going to reach the highest pinnacle. But what we have to do is facilitate the opportunity to progress, at least to be able to get to that point. When an athlete stands on the podium at the very end and they've won that medal, it's a great thing. And it's a great thing to hear that national anthem and see that flag go up. And Singaporeans felt that in 2016. It was something that probably it was expected, they wanted it, but whether they believed it could happen is another thing. Now they're seeing it can happen. Okay, Singapore, let's go move forward. Okay, Singapore, we have a population of 5.8 million people. Okay, Stephen talked about some of the predictors for success at the international level. Population is one of the drivers. So we're already at a deficit based on our population on are we capable of getting to that level and doing it on a continuous basis. Societal pressures, roadblocks, motivation to participate. Why do athletes want to continue on to that next level? Why do people want to participate in sports? There's so much research out there, and there's so many different governments around the world that are looking for reasons as to build health and wellness within their communities. The participation of getting more people involved for an active lifestyle for life is the driver. It's not the sport itself, because the risk of getting to the top and what comes out at the end is not there. I talked about who were the motivators or who were the inspirers initially with the young kids, with Joseph and with Michael Phelps. It was their parents. It was their siblings. How do we motivate a child that's going through a system that might be a little inept to give them all of the skills to be able to participate for life? Where is the first line of defense to help them want to believe that sport is something that's a journey for their entire life? Whether they're competitive or whether they're just a participant, it comes from that first impression, and that's from the parents. So within a society, if our parents aren't active for life, how do we expect the kids to initially believe that sport is something that's part of their life? So for me, when I need to have as many participants as possible, I need to make sure, I want to know that it's something that's the entire community is engaged in. Everyone's engaged in it. Everyone wants to be a part of sports. Everyone wants to be physically active. And so we need to determine what those reasons are. Okay, and so this is why, for me, I enjoy conversations with people and getting into conversation and going back and forth and finding out what makes people tick. It's that discussion and that engagement, because now it becomes action. Okay, because I think the majority of the coaches that are here, you want to engage, you want to get knowledge, and you want to learn, and you want to understand how to better yourself to be able to provide something better for those under your charge. The bottom line is we need to act. We get the information, there's plenty of information there, but the bottom line is we need to act. We need to act on that, and we need to act collectively. It's not something that comes from one person saying, this is how we do it. It comes from the majority saying, we need this movement forward. From the health perspective, we're an aging population. We know that the life expectancy is increasing. So that puts stress on the health systems in the community later on, further and further. Governments know this, and they're investing. One of the biggest movements in Singapore right now is to get people active. And we're starting to see with the emergence of the facilities and things that are being built in different areas. There's different centers around Singapore, central, north, south, east, and west, that are going to be built over the next 20 to 30 years to engage people in a community environment that has an active lifestyle. It's about getting people engaged. Okay, my job at the top as an elite coach, to me, is the easiest job, only if we have the athletes ready when they get to that level. For me, the most important people in preparing where we are as a nation to have sustainability happens from the bottom. And so part of my job is to help build systems and work with the communities and work with the different agencies in order for us to build those systems. And again, words are words. Again, like Stephen said, it doesn't matter what you call things. It's about where is the action and where are we taking those steps forward. I look in the pool every day and I see these young faces. I've coached athletes that are from the 18 to 30-year-old bracket for the last 21 years. And now I'm working with 12 through 18-year-olds. And it's a much different world, Okay, and there's a lot of pressures that are put on them at very specific times, but we have to be the gatekeepers of their careers. We can't assume that that 13-year-old is capable of doing what the 21-year-old or the 24-year-old in the lane next to them is capable of doing. Sure, they can get in and do the swim, and sure, they want to get in there and try and beat them every time, but we still have to remember what that growth and what's ahead of them and what they still have to learn so we don't limit their level of success. So for me, it's like we're in a community, we have everything at our hand. We have every asset that we can possibly have to create something great. Okay, and why is it that a champion can be bred from absolutely nothing and come from countries that are third world, that have no facilities, and then from another country, we've seen Joseph come through, where it's a country that has everything at hand, and there's another champion that's born there. It can come from any area. It comes from either opportunity, is the position that Joseph had, or it can come from necessity. And the ones that where it comes from necessity, there's a different drive in that individual. But there are still things that we can learn from those communities on how we can adapt things and bring it back to ours, the understanding, because it builds an individual, and that character of that individual moving through is what's going to make them successful at the end of the line. Now again, there's very few athletes that get to the top, but those athletes that get to the top, they need a support network. And the support network is not necessarily the family, the coaches. The biggest support network for even the elitist athlete is the friendships that they've built along the way. And they've started from the very youngest age, the time when they're running, they're playing in the playgrounds. It doesn't matter what's happening as long as they get the chance to play and do as many things as they possibly can. It's like you have to have a plan. If you don't act, and you don't keep moving forward, just trying to think about what the perfect thing is to do and what do we have to put in place that's perfect, thinking that this is going to be the outcome that we have, you're always going to be behind. We're chasing down the world right now. Troy talked about we have some of the best 10 to 12-year-olds in the world in swimming. We do. And then they hit school, and they hit the difficulties of school. And we need to manage what happens in that area. But it doesn't start there. It starts from the very beginning. What were they exposed to at the very youngest of ages that allows some flexibility of what we do in those critical years? When we talk about the critical periods of their growth, when they're going through this rapid growth for aerobic development, all of a sudden, in their adolescent years, what happens there when we're faced with these types of pressures, stresses, and barriers? We have to make decisions. So we have to equip our coaches with the ability to make decisions on the spot to help these kids engage, stay engaged, and retain them in the sport. Because again, as we keep dropping off and we don't retain athletes as they move through the years, we are never going to have multiple athletes that can get up there and fight for those medals at the end. It's a process from start to finish, and each athlete needs a support network. So building sustainable pathways takes knowledge, resource, motivation, and buy-in from the majority to achieve the success. I hate that word buy-in because I don't understand why people don't get it. I think everyone has it in them that they want everyone to be successful. It starts, if it's your child, as a parent, you want your child to be successful. If you're a coach, you want every child that's underneath you or in your charge, you want them to be successful. But then they become these roadblocks along the way, and we forget to listen. The two biggest assets we have as coaches are our eyes and our ears. It's observation, which means watching. Watch, and then listen. If we don't watch and we don't listen, we miss the boat. And too many of those Joseph schoolings are going to get lost along the way. So, one of my biggest things is physical literacy. So I've kind of I grew up in a world, I'm from Australia, and I grew up playing. My entire life, I grew up playing. Everything for me, I hated going into the classroom and studying. I loved to be outside playing. And I was exposed, I was allowed to play multiple sports. I think the one thing that was different for my upbringing was it allowed me to test things out and find myself. It allowed me to become confident in how I was around people, but it also it gave me a different sense of understanding of learning when I was in the classroom, and I was able to do very well along those stages too. These are a balance. Everything's a balance in life. Physical literacy is, it gives the child, once the child knows that they have the capacity to move, they build the confidence, and it gives them more of an engagement and desire to want to stay and be physically active for life. We expose them to multiple things. You've got air, you've got water, you have land, and then you have your ice and snow fields. Okay, so there's different areas of movements and understanding of how the body moves through. Understanding where your spatial awareness is helps you understand. It gives you better adaptation and the ability to problem solve, act on the spot. These are life lessons. These are things that continue with us for life. I don't believe physical literacy. I absolutely don't believe that it finishes when we're 12 years of age. I believe that it sets the foundation for us for the rest of our life, and there's a continued physical literacy throughout your entire life. What that is, I don't know, but I believe it's there. You know, with the brain, they once said that once the brain matured, that was it. People had strokes. If there was damage to the brain, to those particular areas, there was no way you could bring it back. But now with neuroplasticity, they're starting to find, and the research is showing that, yeah, there's certain things and there's pathways that are there and are in place and they're solid and you can't change them. And once they're damaged, they're damaged. But what they're starting to learn is the brain, it's plastic. And it can change and it can grow, and there are other things that can happen. So even as you get older, there's the ability to change, there is ability to learn new things, and there's ability to adapt to the environment, which is good for athletes that haven't had the skill level that they were exposed to at a younger age. The problem is do we have the time with those athletes to go through what they need to do in order to improve their skill levels to be able to be competitive at the highest level? So John Wooden was, he's a legendary basketball coach from the United States. And the one thing I loved about this man was the way he responded to his athletes. He was one of the most winningest coaches in the US, but what resonated to everyone was the types of people that developed underneath him, the athletes, the people that they became, and how he taught them and what he did with them. But the statement, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have the time to do it over? And it goes back to what Stephen said. A child is 5 years old, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 once in their life. And if we don't expose them to the things along the way and give them the opportunities, we're going to lose them. We don't get them back. I wanted to thank NYSI for letting me to come here and speak, and hopefully I was able to bring something else. I appreciate all the other speakers that came ahead, and hopefully everyone here is enjoying the conversations that are going on.